Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Escape the Dark Sector from Themeborn Games. Disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this game. I really enjoyed the previous series, Escape the Dark Castle, especially playing with my son, so does taking the game into a sci-fi setting improve it? Let's find out and get to the list. I'm starting out with a pro at number 5, which focuses on how quick and accessible the game is to play. Like I said, it's one of my 7-year-old's favorites. A full game will usually consist of 14 mission cards, but resolving each one takes usually only 2 to 3 minutes, so even with 4 players you can get through an entire game in under an hour. And except for a few minor tactical considerations in combat, especially with the new ranged combat, the rules are incredibly simple to teach, taking only moments, so you can really just put this on the table and jump right into playing. But that leads right into my number 4, which is a full-on con, and that's the fact that the gameplay can be a little too simplistic and sometimes repetitive. While the encounter cards you face are very different thematically and do sometimes throw in some new quirks and fun kinks to the system, in the end, basically the only reward the game can give you is more item cards, and the only penalty is damage to your characters. So while they might change up how that happens, it still feels pretty straightforward, and again can feel a little bit repetitive and redundant if you play the game a bunch in a row. But even though those core mechanics might get a bit samey, my number 3 is still a pro, and that's focusing on the theme and atmosphere of the game, and man, I love it. Just like Escape the Dark Castle before it, this game has these huge encounter cards with really cool black and white art on them, and they also include flavor text that's really evocative in a quick time, so you do feel like you have a fun little story each time you play, or at least I do, and it definitely makes the game feel like it comes to life and takes you into this little dark adventure each time you set it up. But for my number 2, I'm going down to a mix, although it leans pro for me, and that's the combat system. Combat in Escape the Dark Sector is really simple. Generally, you're rolling a die to see if you deal damage to the enemy and take damage yourself. Although, compared to Escape the Dark Castle, they did instill some new rules in here, like there's a whole ranged combat thing that kind of handles differently. Now, on the negative side, like other things I've said, combat can get repetitive, especially when you're just failing to hit the right symbol for an enemy and you keep on taking damage as you roll over and over again, especially once you get into close combat, because once you leave ranged combat, you can't return to it. But on the positive side, combat does offer you some simplistic but still fairly interesting tactical choices, especially when you have a group of 3 or 4 characters where the options kind of open up a bit. You can have some characters healing, some characters reloading, other ones flanking the enemy. It's an incredibly simple rule set, but combat still stays pretty exciting, especially fighting the boss at the end. That's almost always a grueling fight to the death. And my final point is kind of related to all of that, and is also a mixed-leaning pro, and that's the general feel of randomness in the game, but mixed with the more positive feeling of push your luck and luck mitigation and risk-reward choices. So yes, the game can be super random. You might draw the right or wrong mission cards, you might get the best or worst item for what you currently need. And whether you disarm a bomb or get blown up by it is all based on dice rolls, whether you defeat the boss with your shot or he blows you up for 3 damage, all based on dice rolls. So there is a ton of randomness here, and if you hate dice luck, you're not going to like this. But the big thing for me that pushes it to a mix and almost to a pro is that while there isn't a ton of mitigation, just a few items and cybernetic skills that can help you out, almost everything in the game is a risk-reward choice, where you can decide to go all in and try to get a big reward, like steal 2 items from somebody at the risk of a 1/3 chance of getting drastically hurt, or you can choose to take the safer option but have fewer items to help you out with later battles. And I do find those to be interesting choices, especially since the probability on each character's die is so clear, and you can really figure out the exact chance and evaluate whether something is worth your time or not. So overall, like the previous game, Escape the Dark Sector is not going to be for everyone. It has a lot of randomness, it can feel very light and kind of more narrative than a meaty game, the choices aren't that tough, enough. But for me at least, and again for my family, for my son, this one is a hit. So quick to play, so simple to explain, with really evocative theme and narrative, and, you know, scary images, but not too gruesome. Between this and Escape the Dark Castle, I would say go with the one whose theme you enjoy more, but I do like the design here slightly more because combat is just that little bit meatier with the range combat. I think it's a nice addition, and I cannot wait to see if they can do some future Kickstarters to add more expansions and kind of extra elements here, just like they did with Escape the Dark Castle previously. If you'd like to see a full playthrough of the game, see how all this works out, click the link that just popped up. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.